I'm Vanessa Rock, the girl on a bike. I'm here in Norway with the 2024 Husqvarna Enduro range, and in this video I'm going to be focusing on the two-strokes and looking at what is new, what it's like to ride, and ultimately what I think of the new range. So let's get in. So here at the launch, we've got the opportunity to get out and ride in consistent terrain on all of the different models back to back, which is a pretty unique environment. So I have been out this morning on the 150, 250 and the 300. I've got the 300 here with me today, and I'm going to talk through what is it that is new about this bike for the 2024 year. What would be easier to do is to tell you what isn't new about these bikes, because Husqvarna have gone for full-blown change to get the most progression from the bike and the riding feel, the performance that we can get from these machines when we're out in the kicking up the dirt. So I'm going to tell you later on in this video what hasn't changed about this bike, but it's a very short list. So we're going to start the other way around and work our way through the bike. Now, as a fleet, the TEs from the different sizes have a lot of similarities. There are a couple of things where they're different, for example, the weight, but I'm going to talk in general about the TE range just so that kind of simplifies it a little bit. Starting off with the frame, completely new frame. The whole design process that they've put into the research and development of this is to really help the anti-squat feel of the bike. Now, what that effectively means is when you're on the bike, it can be quite a strange feeling when the bike squats. As you accelerate, for example, the rear suspension pulls in and the bike kind of dips, and you almost lose a little of the power because the power is going into the squat, not into the going forwards. It's simplifying a little bit, but the whole shape of the new frame, the reinforced it, they've got forged sections, is designed to improve the anti-squat function of this bike, and you can certainly feel that when you're out riding. It feels really solid, it pulls straight. They've got a few different variations on the rider triangle. As you think about the fact that as a rider you've got effectively 4 contact points with the bike, unless you sit down, and then you've got 5, and Husqvarna have worked to try and keep as solid, a comfortable and stable a position as possible as a rider. The bars are a little bit lower and a little bit straighter. The foot pegs have actually gone slightly in and slightly forward. So that has an additional advantage of meaning that they stick out less, which means if you're going to hit deep ruts, etc., you're not going to catch your foot pegs as much. But in combination with that, they've actually improved the surface area of the pegs by 27%. Now, if you think about being on a motorcycle for long periods of time, the fatigue that you can get for your feet from having a small foot peg is going to be improved by a bigger foot peg, and you definitely can feel solid and stable on there. When it comes to the way the motorcycle is mounted on the frame, they've narrowed the tank fairings and made it completely symmetrical. So the feeling between your legs, your ability to grip the tank, is a lot more solid as part of that rider triangle. Now, something in some of the earlier models in the TE range that's sort of maybe been an issue, especially if you talk to my husband, I think he's got through 2 subframes, is the subframes can or have previously been maybe a little bit temperamental if you do some big loop outs. Husqvarna have addressed that this time and recognised that the subframe is being built in a slightly more durable, robust way. Previously, I believe it was carbon fibre subframe. They've now gone for a polyamide aluminium reinforced subframe, and that means that there's aluminium fibres in there at the points that take the most stress, and then it's also then moulded round with additional reinforcement, and hopefully that's going to make the subframe rear of the bike a little bit more durable, which will certainly save some money in my household with my husband's ability to break them quite easily. Back on the riding position, the grip is also kind of benefited. It's probably easier if I just swing my leg over and stand on it. As a rider, you've got your knee grip on the tank as you're riding along. Obviously you'd be standing, but also when you're maybe accelerating, going out faster, straights, whoops, etc., sometimes your leg can come back, and they've actually made a really nice shape and adjusted the style of the back of the bodywork of the bike with a little bit of a flick maybe, and it just gives a little bit of support to the back of your leg on the boot, which is going to help with your fatigue, your comfort and your stability on the bike. The saddle is a completely new material. It's got this sort of crisscross finish, and out riding I definitely felt like it was grippy every time I was sitting down. Be interesting to see how it performs in the wet, but it is a beautiful sunny day in Norway today, so I haven't got a wet test for you, but it feels good and it's certainly grippy, and it's not too hard. Often enduro bike saddles can give you a sore bottom. I do have another video on my channel coming with how to look after your bum on longer rides, so stay tuned for that. Okay, while I'm stood here, it's probably worth mentioning the seat height. I am 169 centimeters tall and I have a 69 centimeter inside leg. Now, bearing in mind right now, I don't have my Alpine Stars body armour on, I don't have a rucksack, so there's probably a little bit less suspension compression than I'd have with my riding gear. It's also worth mentioning that the spring that is in this bike is the standard OEM spring. If I was to have this bike and have it at home, I would of course be putting in the right suspension loaded spring for my body weight. And so you can see quite comfortably, I'm not quite flat-footed, but I've got the solid toes on there. And I think that's a really great thing that they've managed to do with this bike. It's a lot less intimidating in the seat height. The seat height, for reference, is 952 millimeters high. There is a new radiator system on here. They've actually got a new cap on the radiator, which is meant to make it easier for getting in and out of it. I think there's going to be a little bit of a knack to getting into it because the pipe comes straight off the top of the radiator, but apparently that is an improvement. Something that I've quite liked that I've noticed is the expansion pipe or breather pipe for the fuel tank has been vented into a slightly different place. So it's got a slightly longer hose and it now goes down and out to the side, which means if you are going to go upside down, which sometimes happens, you're probably less likely to get the fuel coming over the main components of the bike. While we're talking about a bike potentially being upside down, it's probably worth mentioning some of the electronics in this bike, and it has a new rollover cut-off system. So the bike, if you have a rather more explosive crash where the bike goes over sideways, it will know and cut the throttle, which is going to massively improve safety and reduce the likelihood of a bouncy Bambi flying off down the track into the woods where the rider's left behind and the bike's throttle's still going and it goes off and have some fun on its own. Rest of the electronics, we now have an on-off switch which is in one combined button. Super easy kill switch, really big, right by your hand and an easy reach. On the other side we've got the usual, we've got the horn, the headlight and mapping switch. Now on these two strokes there are two mapping systems, the softer one and then the harder one. I think you can probably gauge what those two settings are going to do, but a key thing is that you can feel the difference a lot more easily than previously. So I've got the 2020 TE300 Husqvarna back home. That is the motorcycle that I did Red Bull Romaniacs on, and I cannot tell which map it's in. I'm going to be completely honest. The difference between them, my refinement wasn't enough, but I can definitely feel the difference on this one. Now, I mentioned the headlight switch. They have an LED light as standard now, which is very cool. It's 30% brighter than previous, the little candle that you got on the enduro bikes, and it pops out about 900 lumens, so loads of little lumens hiding out in there. They've also designed it so that if you were to go into a tree, which I have done before, sorry buddy is my 250, and you crack this, you can replace this and not have to replace the whole LED component, which I quite appreciate as far as the sort of ongoing ownership costs of having these kind of bikes. Right, I'm going to keep just working my way through the motorcycle. If you have any questions that pop up while I'm doing this, do get them in the comments and make sure you hit the bell so that you get notifications for my future videos. Right, the pipe. We can obviously see there is a big expansion chamber here. Someone today has had a little bit of an accident. Disclaimer, that was not me. Now, because of the completely redesigned engine, which we're going to get into in a moment, the exhaust is also redesigned to work with that. They've got rid of the ridges because they, I guess, were no longer needed, and the exhaust has been designed to be slightly higher, less likelihood, apparently, of things like that happen. Unfortunately, the nature of expanded chambers, they are a little bit vulnerable, but there's a blowout kit that can do that. I think I actually have a video on my YouTube of how to get rid of those dents, but they've kind of made the expansion chamber a little bit less vulnerable. That's probably the key word. So the engine. Now there is a whole new development that has gone into this engine, or these series of engines. But the most important thing that's worth us talking about is the fact that this is no longer a TPI, it is a TBI. So this is a throttle body injection. It effectively means that the fuel is being injected into the combustion process at a different point in the process of the engine. That changes the delivery of the power, and they've got two injectors, one to give you the power at the lower end of the rev range, one at the higher end of the edge range. And as a rider, when you're out there on it, you can really feel how responsive, fiery, energetic, right there on the twist of that wrist, that throttle is. It's super smooth. Now, when you compare the 150 to the 250 to 300, the power delivery is completely different, which you'd expect. The gear ratios, they are very different machines. And we can talk a little bit in a moment about my sort of thoughts on where the three different bikes sit. It might help you with which one might be good for you. But the TBI is the new technology in these bikes. Now, interestingly, when I was at Romaniacs in 2021, I was having a look at Graham Jarvis's training bike, and he had some dummy injectors. And I remember looking at it being like, what is this? And it turns out he was almost certainly testing out the technology that is in this bike. But I love the fact that, talking to the Husky guys here, they have been developing this engine since, I think, back in 2017 initially. So the time and the energy, the amount of hours that have gone into the development process, the amount of pro riders they've got into the feedback process, is pretty exciting. And now it's market ready, and we get to have the benefits of that in our own garage, which is mad cool. While I'm looking at the swing arm, this is a hollow die cast aluminium swing arm. They have a weight saving about 190 grams in the design of this new swing arm, and it's improving the stability, the durability, and the absorption of all of the roughness that you're getting out there on a bike. A key thing to mention at the back here, I'll just move my back out of the way, is the axle has also been changed. So it used to be a 25mm axle, it is now a 22mm axle. That's going to give you a little bit more flex, and again, the improvements in that riding performance as a result. Now, if you are someone who has a Husky at the moment and you're thinking, right, I might upgrade to the 2024, but I have a set of 25mm axle tyres in the garage as spares, don't worry, there is a aftermarket OEM adapter that will enable you to put your old tyres that have the 25mm axle onto this bike, even though this bike as standard is on a 22mm axle. That was mind-blowingly complicated for my brain. Brakes on the bike are BrakeTex. Now that is the brakes that we're used to seeing on the Husqvarnas. You can definitely feel that there is an advancement and the development in their responsiveness. The feel and the feedback through the brakes is fantastic. And out in the Norwegian forest, I've definitely put them to test a couple of times today, where a sudden boulder or step or root or tree has sprung on me, and I've had to pull in quite quickly, and it brakes really hard and nicely. Grab handle here is probably worth mentioning. Previous bikes, there hasn't been a really big obvious place to grab. So, you know, say your bike's on the ground and you want to pick it up, that grab handle easily enables you to have something to get hold of. For example, let's say you want to just move it around, smash all my stuff, nice grab handle, and you've also got the ability to pull on there. Now, I often put an additional strap over the back, but actually that's a really solid thing to pull on. The side stand has a lot more strength than I've experienced in some side stands on these bikes. I wouldn't describe it as cheese, which is a really good progression for side stands. A lot of side stands aren't very trustable, but that looks pretty solid. So the weight of the bikes, now this is the TE300. The 250 as well are 107 kilograms. If you go down to the 150, you're going to drop it to 100.2 kilograms. So that's nearly 7 kilo saving. So if I just lay it down, you can see quite how easily and effortlessly that can pick back up. It's a really light bike. I can easily swing it around. So that's the weight. It's easy to pick up. We've done the seat height. Fuel tank. We have an 8.5 litre fuel tank on here. Now, I cannot tell you what the range is on this bike. It completely depends what terrain you're hitting and how much you're brapping away, but an 8.5 litre fuel tank is going to give you plenty of time for a lot of fun. You'll probably want to stop for a coffee or a refuel before that, and if you're doing a race, you're going to be having the pits. We've got the oil separate here. That is in the tank as you would sort of be used to with the TPIs. You don't have to pre-mix your fuel for the two-stroke engine, and we haven't had to do that for a few years, which is quite delightful. Suspension is probably the most important thing that you're going to have set up on your bike. When anyone says to me, right, what customs should I do on my bike, I always say your suspension first, and that is in relation to making sure that the spring is the right weight for you. But on the 2024 bikes, they have also made refining your suspension a lot easier, and you can now do it without any tools at all. So on the front we have closed cartridge suspensions. Now that's effectively going to stop the oil from foaming, which is going to have a huge benefit for a reliable and consistent suspension performance. At the top and the bottom you have the adjustments, so you can do the preload and the rebound in clicks, and I believe it's something like 36 different clicks that you've got in that, and the rear is also adjustable on the bike without needing tools. There is this clever little hatch, is it on this side? And you can go straight inside and we can see how easily accessible that suspension adjustment is. No longer are you going to have to come into the pits and get tools and mess around. You can just give it a few tweaks, see how it feels. I think that is a pretty cool advancement and so easy to put on and off. This bike does have quite a few weight-saving parts. The frame, the subframe, the swing arm, but the overall weight I don't think is too dramatically different from previous models, and that's because there's some additional technology that's gone into this bike to continue to develop and advance it into a better enduro beast than the previous years. Okay, protection on the bike. These bikes are designed to go in aggressive environments and they get dropped. They do, we know that. Now, they come with frame protectors as standard and a good sump plate. Downside, I think, of this sump is that it doesn't protect the linkage at the back, but the reality is not all riders of this bike are going to be going into really rocky and aggressive places, so it makes sense that as standard it comes with a normal size sump, and if you want to, you can get the aftermarket OEM bit that protects the linkage and it bolts on. You can also get guards for your expansion chamber. It looks like this one might have appreciated one earlier. I personally don't ride with a guard because I think that you can sort your exhausts out pretty easily with any dents. So I tend to go for weight saving because I'm not exactly huge. There are 3 more electrical things on this bike that I think are really important to mention. We then have the smart control system. Now, I don't know about you, but I have wasted a few hours of my life, probably in total, trying to diagnose electrical issues on my dirt bike. So what Husqvarna have done is simplified and put together all of the electronics into one smart control unit, which has a little LED light system where they're green or red, and it tells you if, hey, I'm working, or hey, I'm not working, so that you can very easily, under the seat, identify where your faults are. The starter relay does still have a fuse, otherwise you can just look at the LED system and it will tell you where your fault is and you can diagnose it really quickly. What a dream. That's going to save many hours of human time, which is more time to be out there brapping and playing. Amazing. The third electronic thing that I want to mention right now is the electronic exhaust valve system. So it works in conjunction with the TBI, and it is now a electronic system that's going to be reading the terrain, the environment, the RPMs, the way you're riding, what's happening in the engine, you know, maybe the altitude, all of the different variables, and optimizing the flow through the expansion and the exhaust. Now, all of these electronics, including the TBI itself, is designed to enable the engine for itself to think and put the ultimate refinement to give you the best performance out of that throttle at any given time, whatever your range is. And I remember taking a TPI into high altitude for the first time, and you really can feel how that engine is adapting and shifting to its terrain. And on a TBI, just gone one next level of a refinement, which is really exciting. I think when you spend a little bit of time with this bike, you can get to the feeling that Husqvarna have just put quite a lot of thought and customer feedback, rider feedback, professional riders. They've got the likes of Billy Bolt and Graham Jarvis riding these bikes and putting the energy back into the creation of them. And so even things like the fact that down here we've got the chain guard, the bolts on this used to stick out, which means one, they got caught, they're at risk of breaking, but also they grabbed mud and dirt. This is now a smooth system. Just another little thing onto the design that just shows that they've really thought about it. Husqvarna are probably going to want to punch me in the face or tell me off, because I'm going to be really honest with you about what I don't like about these bikes. And this is where we have an awkward silence, because I really like these bikes. I have my own TE Husqvarna 250 at home. I've got the 2020. Would I change it for a 2024? In a heartbeat. I might have to go and sell a kidney or like cut an arm off or something. They start at just over 9 grand and work their way up through the range. But for what you're getting as far as the increase in performance, absolutely incredible bikes. I don't actually have a bad thing to say about them. I mean, maybe that they want full wraparound guards, but that's just my personal preference. Not everyone likes full wraparound guards. I'm really impressed with this bike, I'm going to be honest. What hasn't changed on this bike? I told you I was going to tell you earlier on in the video. Has anyone guessed what hasn't changed on this bike? Let's come back round here so it's really obvious. Can you spot what hasn't changed on the bike, people? Let me know in the comments if you get this right. The wheels and the tyres. So they have the DID rims. This is what we're used to seeing on Husqvarna's. They're durable, they're high performing. So we've got the same rims. And then of course, I think you all know from my own bikes that I run at home, I'm a big fan of the Michelin rubber. The Michelin mediums come as standard. It's the premium rubber in the industry. So why would you not put the premium rubber on the premium bike? That's a pretty top to tail run through of the 2024 TE 2-strokes. Now, I also said I was gonna briefly mention the differences in the bikes and how they actually feel out there. Now, I've had a 150 previously. I have a 250 at home. The 150, I would say, is a completely underappreciated or maybe under-recognized weapon as far as rider development. If you're someone who's thinking, you know what, I want to start getting into hard enduro, I want to start going over logs, going up steps, doing some more aggressive riding, learning, you know, pivot turns, things like that, the 150, lighter weight, a lot less power to get you into trouble, but still plenty of power for the bike to weight ratio. The 150 is going to be a really good tool. Now, from the period of time where I had the 150, my hard enduro progression definitely accelerated because of the confidence of that slightly smaller bike. Now, you've then got the 300 at the other end of the spectrum, and of course the Billy Bolt and the Jarvis, the big machines going out there winning on the podiums, they are on the 300. It is a lot of power. It's all the power you could possibly want. It's right there, it's fiery, it's aggressive. I love the 300. Effortlessly gets you up hill climbs, and it can make up for some of the maybe slightly lazier or less precise rider inputs because you've got the power to just pull you through. The 250 then sits in the middle where, to me, I think it's got all the power you can need. Some of the bigger hill climbs are definitely going to be a bit harder because you haven't got that power to just pull you through. But I think for the rider progression that you're going to get of having to really ride the 250 is one of the reasons why I have a 250 in the garage. I haven't moved up to the 300 because I don't want to become lazy. And I think the 250 is probably my favourite in the range. And I think I can pretty safely say that, which is good seeing as that's the one I've in the garage at home. It's kind of reassuring for me. Let me know if you've got any questions. I feel as though I've just gone like a tornado sandstorm. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just going to sign out. I'm Vanessa Rutt, the girl on a bike, here with Husqvarna in Norway, and that is a run through of the 2024 Husqvarna Enduro range of the 2-strokes. Let me know if you've got any comments in the questions. You know what I meant. I'm going to go ride.